The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty ground as Clayton Reeves stood by the weathered wooden fence, his calloused fingers gripping the letter that had traveled nearly 2,000 miles to reach him. The paper, worn soft from countless readings, contained the delicate script of Miss Margaret Sullivan, the schoolteacher from Ohio who had answered his advertisement for a mail-order bride 3 months prior. Clayton adjusted his wide-brimmed hat against the glare and squinted down the rutted trail that served as the only road to his ranch. The stagecoach was late, not unusual in these parts where Apache raids, broken axles, and flash floods could turn a 2-day journey into a week-long ordeal. Still, his stomach tightened with each passing minute. At 35, he'd spent too many years alone on this patch of Wyoming territory, with only the wind and his scattered cattle for company. The ranch house behind him stood sturdy but plain, built by his own hands from local timber and sealed against the harsh winters with mud and straw. He'd spent the past week scrubbing years of bachelor neglect from its surfaces, even purchasing new curtains from the general store in town, a detail that had raised more than a few eyebrows among the locals who knew him as a man more concerned with practical matters than decoration. A dust cloud appeared on the horizon, growing larger as the familiar rattle and creak of the Overland Stage Company's coach drew near. Clayton straightened his shirt and ran a hand through his dark hair, suddenly aware of every speck of dirt on his clothes, despite having put on his best and only clean outfit that morning. The coach lurched to a stop in a cloud of dust and horse sweat. The driver, old Pete Hawkins, gave Clayton a knowing nod before climbing down to help with the luggage. The door swung open, and Clayton's heart hammered against his ribs as he prepared to meet the woman who would share his life in this unforgiving land. But instead of the young, refined schoolteacher he expected, a woman in a travel-worn black dress emerged, her face partially hidden by a dusty veil. Behind her, like ducklings following their mother, came 5 children of varying ages, the eldest a boy of perhaps 12, the youngest a girl who couldn't have been more than 4, clutching a ragged cloth doll. Clayton stood frozen, the letter crumpling in his fist. This wasn't right. Margaret Sullivan was supposed to be 23, unmarried, with no mention of children in any of her letters. The woman before him looked older, her shoulders bent with a weariness that spoke of hard years and heavy burdens. She lifted her veil, revealing a face that might have been beautiful once, but now bore the lines of grief and hardship. Her eyes, a deep brown, like coffee grounds, met his with a mixture of desperation and defiance. "Mr. Reeves." Her voice was soft but steady. "I'm Lillian Harper." The name meant nothing to him. Clayton glanced at Pete, who shrugged and busied himself with unloading a pitifully small collection of bags in one battered trunk. "I'm afraid there's been some mistake, ma'am," Clayton said, finding his voice at last. "I was expecting Miss Margaret Sullivan." The woman Lillian swayed slightly, and the eldest boy quickly steadied her. "There's no mistake, Mr. Reeves. I need to explain." She glanced at her children, who huddled closer to her skirts. "These are my children, Thomas, Mary, Samuel, Ruth, and little Emma." Each child nodded or curtsied as their name was spoken, their clothes as worn as their mother's, their face bearing the pinched look of those who'd known hunger too intimately. "Ma'am, I don't understand," Clayton said, his dreams of a fresh start crumbling like old adobe. "My arrangement was with Miss Sullivan. I've got her letters." "Please," Lillian interrupted, her composure finally cracking. "Let me explain. My husband, James Harper, died 6 months ago. We lost our farm in Iowa to the bank. I had nowhere to go, no family to turn to. I saw your advertisement in the newspaper, but I knew no man would want a widow with 5 children." The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Clayton processed her words. Around them, the empty landscape stretched endlessly, broken only by distant mesas and the occasional sagebrush. "So you lied," he said flatly. "I had no choice." The words burst from her like water through a broken dam. "My children were starving. We were sleeping in alleys, begging for scraps. When I saw your advertisement, I thought maybe God was showing me a way. I'm a good cook. Mr. Reeves, I can keep house, mend clothes, help with the ranch work. I'm not afraid of hard labor." "That's not the point," Clayton said, anger and disappointment warring in his chest. "You deceived me, made me think—" He stopped, unwilling to voice the dreams he'd built around Margaret Sullivan's letters. Thomas, the eldest boy, stepped forward. "Please, sir, Mama didn't mean any harm. She just wanted to keep us together. The orphanage in Council Bluffs wanted to split us up." Clayton looked at the boy, thin but straight-backed, with eyes that had seen too much for his years. Then at the others, Mary, perhaps 10, trying to look brave, Samuel, 8 or 9, clutching his mother's hand, Ruth, no more than 6, peeking out from behind her siblings, and little Emma, thumb in her mouth, the cloth doll pressed against her chest. "Pete!" Clayton called to the driver, who was pretending not to eavesdrop while checking the horses' harnesses. "When's the next stage back east?" "Not for another week." "Clay," Pete replied. "And that's if the weather holds and the Sioux stay peaceful." A week. Clayton ran a hand over his face. The nearest town was a day's ride, and it barely had a hotel, let alone accommodations for a woman and 5 children. Lillian straightened her shoulders. "We'll manage, Mr. Reeves. If you could just point us toward town, we'll—" "With what money?" Clayton asked harshly. "You have the fare back east." Her silence was answer enough. "Mama," little Emma tugged at her mother's skirt. "I'm hungry." The simple words hit Clayton like a physical blow. He looked at the children again, really looked at them. Beneath the trail dust and worn clothes, he saw the hollow cheeks, the way they stood close together as if drawing strength from each other. He thought of the empty bedrooms in his house, the 2 quiet evenings, the meals eaten alone. Then he thought of Margaret Sullivan, probably safe in her Ohio schoolhouse, and felt a fool for believing happiness could be ordered through the mail like a catalog purchase. "Driver," he said finally, his voice rough. "They'll be staying." Pete's eyebrows shot up, but he wisely kept his questions to himself. Lillian's legs nearly buckled. "Mr. Reeves, Don't mistake this for kindness." Clayton cut her off. "I won't turn children out to starve, but I didn't ask for this. You'll earn your keep, and the children old enough will help with chores. This is a working ranch, not a charity house." "Of course," Lillian whispered. "Thank you." Clayton grabbed the trunk, grunting at its meager weight. "Pete, help me with the bags. Then you can be on your way." As they loaded the Harper family's few possessions onto the wagon, Clayton caught Pete's arm. "Not a word of this in town," he warned. Pete grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Wouldn't dream of it, though folks are bound to notice when you show up with a ready-made family instead of a blushing bride." Clayton's glare could have scorched paint, and Pete raised his hands in surrender before climbing back onto the coach. As the stage pulled away, leaving them in a cloud of settling dust, Clayton faced his unexpected guests. "Ranch house is a half-mile up the trail. Can the little ones make it?" "We've walked farther," Thomas said with quiet pride. Clayton nodded and started walking, not looking back to see if they followed. Behind him, he heard Lillian murmuring encouragement to the younger children, promising rest and food soon. The house came into view, 2 stories of rough timber with a wide porch and sturdy barn nearby. It wasn't much, but it was solid and safe, built to withstand whatever the territory could throw at it. "It's beautiful," Mary breathed, and Clayton turned in surprise. Beautiful wasn't a word often applied to his utilitarian home. That evening, as the aroma of the first real meal in months filled the house, Lillian had worked miracles with the simple supplies in his pantry. Clayton stood on the porch, listening to sounds he'd never heard within these walls. Children's laughter, the clatter of dishes being set with care, soft voices discussing the day's adventures. Thomas appeared beside him. "Mr. Reeves, Mama wanted me to tell you supper's ready." Clayton nodded, but didn't move immediately. "Your father," he said carefully. "How did he die?" "Fever," Thomas replied. "Took him quick. He was a good man. Worked hard. Just wasn't enough to save the farm after he was gone." "I'm sorry for your loss, boy." Thomas studied him with eyes too old for his face. "Mama's a good woman, Mr. Reeves. She didn't mean to deceive you. She loves us too much to let us be scattered to the wind." Clayton said nothing, but as he followed the boy inside to the warm light and waiting meal, he wondered if perhaps the stage had brought him something he needed more than a mail-order bride, a reason to make this house a home. The morning sun had barely crested the eastern hills when Clayton found himself staring at a photograph in the front parlor. He'd discovered it while moving a crate to make room for the children's belongings, a small daguerreotype that had fallen from Lillian's travel bag. The man in the image wore a cavalry uniform, his bearing proud despite the worn edges of the photograph. Something about the face nagged at Clayton's memory like a splinter working its way to the surface. "That's James." Lillian's voice came from behind him. She stood in the doorway, already dressed for the day's work, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. "My late husband." Clayton turned the photograph toward the morning light filtering through the window. The uniform, the set of the jaw, those particular eyes' recognition struck him like a thunderbolt. "Fort Robinson," he breathed. "Summer of '76. Lillian moved closer, her expression sharpening. "You knew him." "James Harper." Clayton set the photograph on the mantel with careful hands. "Sergeant James Harper. We served together during the Indian campaigns. He saved my life once, pulled me out of an ambush near Hat Creek." The color drained from Lillian's face. She gripped the back of a chair for support. "He mentioned a friend named Reeves, said you were the most honorable man he'd ever known. I assumed it was a different Reeves. The frontier's full of men with that name." Clayton's mind reeled back through the year's nights around campfires, sharing rations and stories, watching each other's backs through skirmishes and long patrols. James had spoken often of his girl back in Iowa, the farm he planned to start, the family he'd raise, dreams that had come true, only to crumble into dust. "Why didn't you tell me?" Clayton asked, his voice rougher than intended. Would it have mattered? Lillian lifted her chin. "Would you have been more likely to take in your friend's widow and orphans? Or would you have sent us away faster to avoid the obligation?" Before Clayton could answer, the thunder of approaching horses interrupted them. Through the window, he spotted 3 riders coming hard down the trail, dust billowing in their wake. His hand instinctively moved to the rifle mounted above the door. "Thomas," Lillian called sharply. "Take your siblings upstairs, now." The boy appeared from the kitchen, read the tension in the room, and quickly herded the younger children up the stairs despite their protests. Clayton stepped onto the porch, rifle cradled casually but ready. The riders pulled up hard in the yard, their horses lathered with sweat. The lead man dismounted with practiced ease, his movement speaking of military training. A badge glinted on his vest, a federal marshal's star. Clayton Reeves. The marshal was perhaps 40, with steel-gray hair and eyes like chips of winter ice. "Marshal Marcus Whitley. We're tracking a fugitive." Clayton kept his expression neutral. What kind of fugitive brings federal law this far into the territory? Whitley reached into his coat and produced a wanted poster. "Woman named Lillian Harper. Robbed the First National Bank in Council Bluffs 2 weeks ago. Made off with nearly $3,000. Traveling with 5 children as cover." Clayton's blood chilled as he looked at the sketch on the poster. It could have been Lillian or any of 100 women with dark hair and regular features. "That's a serious accusation, Marshal." "Serious crime," Whitley countered. "Bank guard died in the robbery. That makes it murder as well as theft." The other 2 deputies had dismounted, hands resting on their sidearms. Word is a woman matching her description took the westbound stage. This is the last stop before the mountain passes. From inside the house came the creak of a floorboard. Clayton shifted slightly, blocking the doorway. Lots of women travel these routes, widow women with children, looking for new starts. This one's different. One of the deputies spoke up, younger and eager to prove himself. Witnesses say she was desperate, talked about children going hungry. That kind of desperation makes people dangerous. Whitley studied Clayton with the patience of a man who'd tracked fugitives across half the territories. You running a ranch here all alone. Reeves must get lonely. Might make a man susceptible to a pretty face with a sad story. I run my ranch as I see fit, Clayton replied evenly, and I don't take kindly to implications about my judgment. The marshal's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. No offense meant. Just find it curious that you're out here chatting when most ranchers would be starting their morning chores. Almost like you're keeping us from looking around. You have a warrant. Don't need one if we're in pursuit of a dangerous fugitive. Whitley took a step forward. Now, you can make this easy. Or, Mr. Reeves. Lillian appeared in the doorway, calm as a Sunday morning. I've got breakfast ready if these gentlemen would like to. She stopped, seeming to notice the tension for the first time. Is everything all right? Whitley's hand moved toward his gun. Lillian Harper? Yes. She tilted her head, confusion plain on her face. I'm Lillian Harper. Is there some trouble? Clayton felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word, one suspicious movement, and lead would start flying with children in the house. He made his choice. Mrs. Harper is my guest. Marshall. She and her children arrived yesterday on the stage. I can vouch for her character. Your word might carry weight in these parts. Reeves, Whitley said, producing the wanted poster. But this says different. Lillian studied the poster with what appeared to be genuine shock. This looks like me, but I've never robbed anyone. I've never even been to Council Bluffs. We came from Cedar Rapids. Convenient story, the young deputy sneered. Got any proof? Thomas appeared at the top of the stairs. Mama, there's riders coming from the west too. Everyone tensed. More law or something worse. Clayton kept his rifle ready. Marshal, seems we're about to have more company. Might be wise to sort this out before the yard gets crowded. Whitley drew his pistol but kept it pointed at the ground. Everyone stays put until we know who's... The shot came from nowhere, splintering the porch post inches from Whitley's head. Everyone dove for cover as more shots followed, coming from the rocky outcropping to the west. Inside, Clayton roared, shoving Lillian through the door as bullets peppered the wall. The deputies scrambled for cover behind their horses while Whitley pressed against the porch rail, returning fire. Through the window, Clayton glimpsed their attackers, 4 riders charging hard, guns blazing. Not lawmen. Their faces were masked, their intent clear in their aggressive approach. The bank money, one of them shouted. Where's our money? Lillian. Clayton and Lillian exchanged a quick glance. Her face had gone white, but her eyes blazed with anger rather than guilt. I don't know what they're talking about. Upstairs window. Clayton ordered, You can shoot. She grabbed the spare rifle he offered. James taught me. As she raced up the stairs, Clayton took position at the front window. Outside, Whitley and his deputies had found cover and were returning fire. The attackers had dismounted, using the rocks for protection. Marshal, Clayton called out. Seems like we've got a common problem. Seems like, Whitley shouted back. These friends of yours, Reeves. Never seen them before, but they seem mighty interested in your fugitive. A shot from upstairs dropped one of the attackers. Lillian had found her mark. The remaining 3 increased their fire, forcing everyone to duck. During a lull, one of the masked riders called out, You got something belongs to us, woman. You think changing your name fools anyone. We know who you are. Sarah. Sarah Clayton risked a glance at the stairs where Lillian was reloading. She met his eyes and shook her head firmly. The firefight continued for several more minutes before the attackers suddenly broke off, dragging their wounded companion to their horses. As they retreated, one turned in his saddle. "This ain't over. We'll be back for what's ours." In the ensuing quiet, broken only by the sound of brass casings rolling across the floor, Clayton kept his rifle trained on the retreating riders until they disappeared over a rise. Whitley emerged from cover, dusty but unharmed. His deputies checked themselves for injuries while keeping watchful eyes on the house. "Well," the marshal said, reloading his pistol. "That was interesting. Care to explain why those men seem to think your guest has their money? Reeves." Before Clayton could answer, Lillian came down the stairs, still carrying the rifle. "Because there's another woman using my name," she said firmly. "Marshal, I'll swear on my children's lives that I've never robbed a bank, but someone has someone who knew enough about me to use my name and description." Whitley studied her for a long moment. "That's a convenient story, ma'am." "It's the truth." Lillian set the rifle aside and reached into her pocket. "I have one thing that might help, something my husband left me." She produced a worn envelope. "Mr. Reeves, this is for you. James wrote it before he died. Told me to find Clayton Reeves if I ever needed help. I didn't connect you with his friend until this morning." Clayton took the letter with unsteady hands. His name was written across the front in James's familiar scrawl. Inside, dated 6 months ago, *Clayton, *. If you're reading this, then I'm gone and Lillian needs help. The fever's got me, and I know I won't see another sunrise. I'm leaving behind a good woman and 5 beautiful children with no one to turn to. *. Remember that night at Hat Creek, you asked what you could ever do to repay me for pulling you out of that ambush? I laughed it off, said that's what brothers in arms do. But now I'm calling in that debt, not for me, but for them. Lillian's strong, but the world's hard on a woman alone. The children deserve a chance at life. I know it's a lot to ask, but you're the only man I trust to do right by them. There's something else. We had trouble in Cedar Rapids, a woman named Sarah Blackwood who worked at the bank. She had her eye on me. Wouldn't take no for an answer. When I married Lillian, Sarah swore she'd make us pay. She knows things about us, about Lillian. Be careful. Be that man. Reeves, the one who always kept his word, who stood watch all night so the rest of us could sleep. Be that man for them. Your brother in all but blood. James Harper, Clayton looked up from the letter to find everyone watching him. He handed it to Whitley without a word. The marshal read it slowly, his expression never changing. Finally, he folded it carefully and handed it back. This Sarah Blackwood, you ever hear of her? Mrs. Harper. Lillian nodded. She worked at the Farmers Bank in Cedar Rapids, always watching James, making excuses to talk to him. After we married, she turned vicious, spread rumors, tried to get James fired from his job at the mill. We thought we were free of her when we moved to the farm. Cedar Rapids to Council Bluffs, Whitley mused. Not that far for someone with a grudge and a plan. His younger deputy spoke up. Marshal, you can't seriously believe... What I believe, Whitley cut him off, is that we've got a complicated situation. Mrs. Harper, I'll need you to come to town, make a formal statement, but... He raised a hand as Clayton stepped forward. You're not under arrest. Not yet. Those men who just tried to kill us all seem to think the real thief is someone else. I intend to find out who's right. The children, Lillian began, can stay here with Mr. Reeves, assuming he's willing to take responsibility. Clayton didn't hesitate. They'll be safe here. As Whitley and his men prepared to leave with Lillian, Thomas came downstairs. His siblings clustered behind him on the landing. Mama. She went to them, speaking softly, reassuring them she'd be back soon. Emma clung to her skirts until Thomas gently pulled her away. At the door, Lillian turned to Clayton. "Thank you for believing me. For the letter. For James." Clayton just nodded, his throat tight with too many emotions to name. As the riders disappeared down the trail, Lillian sitting straight-backed behind Whitley. Clayton faced 5 frightened children. "Well," he said gruffly, "I suppose you'll be wanting lunch soon." Mary, the second eldest, found her voice. "Is Mama going to be all right?" Clayton looked at James's children, his friend's legacy, and made another choice. "Your Mama's the strongest woman I've met. She'll be fine. Now, who knows how to gather eggs?" As the children slowly relaxed into chores and routine, Clayton kept watch from the porch. Somewhere out there, Sarah Blackwood was playing a dangerous game, and the stakes had just become personal. He'd failed James once by not being there when the fever took him. He wouldn't fail him again. The letter lay heavy in his pocket, each word a reminder of debts owed and promises yet to keep. Whatever came next, the Harper family was under his protection now, and Clayton Reeves always kept his word. The kitchen was quiet, save for the soft scrape of Lillian's spoon against her coffee cup. She'd returned from town 2 hours ago. Marshal Whitley seemingly satisfied with her statement for now, but the day's ordeal had left shadows under her eyes. Clayton sat across from her at the rough pine table, his own coffee growing cold as he watched her struggle with words she clearly needed to say. "The children are asleep," she finally offered. "Thomas made sure they said their prayers." "Good boy, Thomas. Steady head on his shoulders." "Like his father." Lillian's voice caught slightly. "Mr. Reeves Clayton. There's more to James's letter, things he didn't write down." Clayton waited. In his experience, truth came easier in the quiet spaces between words. Lillian reached into her travel bag and withdrew another envelope, this one sealed with wax. "He gave me this the night before he died, said to open it only if I found you, only if I was certain you were the man from Fort Robinson." She slid it across the table. I think James knew Sarah Blackwood would come after us. He just didn't know how." The wax seal broke with a soft crack. Inside, James's handwriting had grown shaky, but the words were clear. Asterisk Clayton, asterisk. Asterisk. If Lillian has given you this, then Sarah has made her move. I should have told you everything in the first letter, but I hoped I was wrong. Hoped my death would end her obsession. Asterisk Sarah Blackwood isn't just a woman scorned. Her father, Samuel Blackwood, ran an outlaw gang that terrorized the Cedar Rapids area for years. The Blackwood Gang, maybe you heard of them even out in Wyoming. Samuel was hanged 5 years ago, but Sarah learned his trade well. She can forge documents, lie with the face of an angel, and shoot better than most men. Asterisk, I made the mistake of being kind to her when she was new in town, before I knew who her father was. By the time I learned the truth, she'd fixed her sights on me when I married Lillian instead. Sarah swore she'd destroy everything I loved. There's a hidden box buried beneath the large oak tree behind our old house in Cedar Rapids' southeast corner, 3 feet down. Inside is evidence that could clear Lillian if Sarah tries to frame her for anything. I gathered it when Sarah's threats grew worse. Bank records she forged with Lillian's name, letters describing her plans. I meant to turn it over to the law, but then the fever took hold. Asterisk brother. I'm fading fast now. Take care of them. Sarah's dangerous, but she's also arrogant. She'll make a mistake. When she does, be ready. Asterisk watch for a scar on her left hand, between thumb and forefinger. She got it practicing with her father's gang. It's the one thing she can't hide. Asterisk James asterisk. Clayton set down the letter, his mind racing. The woman on the wanted poster, no mention of a scar. Because it's not me. Lillian's hands trembled slightly as she lifted her own, showing unblemished skin. Clayton, I need to tell you something else. When we were at the marshal's office today, a woman came in, said she'd seen suspicious riders near Miller's Creek. She was blonde, Pretty, very helpful. But when she reached for the pen to sign her statement, a scar? Lillian nodded. Between her thumb and forefinger, left hand. She saw me notice it and left quickly. Clayton was already reaching for his gun belt. She's here, playing some game, getting close to the law while they hunt for you. Where are you going? To find Whitley. He needs to... The sound of horses approaching fast cut him off. Clayton moved to the window, hand on his pistol. By the moon's light, he could see a lone rider coming hard, slumped low in the saddle. Stay here, he ordered, stepping onto the porch. The rider was Whitley's young deputy, Matthews. He half fell from his horse, clutching his side where blood seeped between his fingers. Ambush, he gasped as Clayton caught him. The marshal, the woman. Lillian appeared with clean cloths and water, immediately tending to the wound despite Clayton's order to stay inside. Where's Marshal Whitley? She asked as she worked. Dead. Matthews groaned as Lillian pressed against the wound. That woman who came in earlier. She came back after dark, said she had more information, led us into a trap at Miller's Creek. She shot the marshal in the back, laughed while she did it, said to tell the widow Harper that Sarah Blackwood always keeps her promises. Clayton's blood ran cold. Where's Deputy Carson? Took him too. She's got at least 6 men with her now. Matthews gripped Clayton's arm with surprising strength. She's coming here, tonight. Wants the woman and the money she claims misses. Harper stole. Money that doesn't exist, Lillian said tightly, tying off the bandage. Doesn't matter what exists. Matthews wheezed. She'll tear this place apart looking for it. Kill everyone here to make her point. Clayton helped the wounded man inside, mind already working through their defenses. 1 man, 1 woman, 5 children, and a wounded deputy against Sarah Blackwood and 6 outlaws. The odds were grim. Thomas, he called, and the boy appeared on the stairs, already dressed despite the late hour. Take your siblings to the root cellar. There's a false back wall. Push the 3rd board from the left. Space behind it leads to a tunnel that comes out by the creek. If shooting starts, you run. Understand? The boy's face was pale but determined. Yes, sir, but Mama... I'll take care of your mother. You take care of them. That's what your father would want. As Thomas gathered his siblings, Lillian loaded rifles with practiced efficiency. I won't hide while you fight my battles. Not your battle anymore, Clayton said grimly. It's mine. James asked me to protect his family. That's what I aim to do. By dying nobly, that helps no one. She checked the loads in a revolver, her movements sure. I may not be a soldier, but I won't be a victim. Not again. Before Clayton could respond, a voice called from the darkness beyond the yard. Female, amused, with an edge sharp as winter wind. Lillian Harper, or should I say, the woman pretending to be me. Come out and let's discuss this like civilized people. Clayton positioned himself at the window, rifle ready. By the barn, he could see movement riders spreading out to surround the house. Sarah Blackwood, I presume. Laughter like breaking glass. And you must be the noble Clayton Reeves. James talked about you. You know, his heroic friend who'd save his family if needed. How's that working out? Well enough, Clayton called back. Your frame job's falling apart. Deputy Matthews lived to tell what you did to the marshal. A pause, then, unfortunate, but he won't live through the night. None of you will unless I get what I want. The bank money, Lillian called out, surprising Clayton. Money you stole and blamed on me. My money, Sarah's composure cracked, voice rising. Payment for everything your husband cost me. He should have been mine. Would have been, if not for you. Plain little Lillian with your modest ways and churning out babies like a broodmare. Clayton felt Lillian stiffen beside him, but she kept her voice steady. James never loved you. He saw what you were your father's daughter. The first shot shattered the front window. Clayton pulled Lillian down as more bullets peppered the walls. So much for civilized discussion? From multiple positions, muzzle flashes lit the darkness. Clayton returned fire, trying to count shooters. At least 7, maybe more. They were good, patient, working to pin the defenders while others likely moved to flank. "The children?" Lillian asked between shots. "Thomas will get them out." Clayton hoped it was true. The boy had his father's steady nerves. A torch arced through the broken window, spreading flames across the wooden floor. Lillian beat it out with a blanket while Clayton covered her. More torches followed. "Going to burn you out," Sarah called. "Unless you'd prefer to settle this properly. You and me, Lillian. Winner takes all." "Don't," Clayton warned. But Lillian was already moving. "I accept," she shouted. "But if I win, you and your men leave, forever. And when I win, I get the money and the pleasure of watching this place burn with everyone in it." Clayton grabbed Lillian's arm. "You can't trust her." "I don't." Lillian met his eyes, and he saw James's courage reflected there. "But I won't let my children burn for my sake. She wants me, not them." They heard Sarah ordering her men to hold fire. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall for a woman, dressed in men's riding clothes, blonde hair glinting in the moonlight. Even at a distance, her beauty was evident. But it was a cold beauty, like winter ice. Lillian checked her revolver one last time. "If something happens, nothing's going to happen." Clayton interrupted. "Because I'll be watching. First sign of treachery, I start shooting." She touched his hand briefly, then stepped onto the porch. "I'm here, Sarah." Sarah Blackwood moved closer, her own gun held casually at her side, in the flickering light from the torch fires. Clayton could see her face clearly beautiful indeed, but with eyes that held nothing but hatred. "Look at you," Sarah sneered. "Playing the frontier wife. Do you know what it was like? Watching James choose you, watching him moon over your letters while I was right there." "You were never what he wanted," Lillian said simply. "He wanted a partner, not a possession." Sarah's face contorted. "I would have given him everything instead. He chose poverty and struggle with you." Her voice dropped dangerously. "So I took it all away. The bank job was easy, a few forged documents, some well-placed whispers, and suddenly the grieving widow Harper is a desperate thief. I even made sure to be seen in places you'd been, just enough to confuse witnesses. You killed a bank guard, an innocent man." "A necessity," Sarah shrugged. "Though I would have preferred it be you." Clayton saw it then, the slight shift in Sarah's stance, the way her gun hand tightened. "Lillian down." Both women drew. 2 shots cracked almost as one. Sarah's bullet whined past Lillian's ear, but Lillian's aim was true. Sarah Blackwood stumbled backward, looking down in shock at the spreading crimson on her chest. "You!" Sarah dropped to her knees, gun falling from nerveless fingers. "How?" "James taught me," Lillian said quietly. "Said a frontier woman should know how to protect what's hers." Sarah's men started forward, but Clayton's rifle spoke, dropping the closest one. "Nobody moves. Your boss is down. Question is, do you want to join her?" For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Matthews, wounded but game, appeared at another window with a shotgun. The odds had shifted. "Sarah," one of the outlaws called uncertainly. Sarah Blackwood coughed, blood flecking her lips. With tremendous effort, she raised her head. "The money, hidden at—" Her eyes found Lillian one last time, still burning with hatred. "Should have been mine." She fell forward and moved no more. The outlaws looked at each other, leaderless and outnumbered. Without a word, they began backing toward their horses. "Let them go," Clayton decided. "But if I see any of you in the territory again, you'll answer for tonight." They needed no further encouragement, spurring their mounts into the darkness. As the hoofbeats faded, Lillian dropped to her knees, the revolver falling from shaking hands. Clayton was beside her instantly. "You're hurt." "No." She was trembling now, reaction setting in. I've never killed anyone before." "You protected your family. Nothing more, nothing less." He helped her stand, noting how she leaned into his strength, just like James would have done. A small voice called from the root cellar. "Mama, is it safe?" "Yes, sweetheart," Lillian managed. "It's safe now." As the children emerged, Thomas leading them with protective care, Clayton surveyed the damage. Bullet holes, scorch marks, broken windows, but the house stood. The family was safe. Matthews limped over, leaning heavily on his shotgun. "I'll need to report this. There'll be questions." "The truth should suffice," Clayton said. "Sarah Blackwood confessed before witnesses. The real bank robber is dead." "What about the money?" Clayton looked down at Sarah's body. "She took the location to her grave. Maybe that's best. Blood money never brings happiness." As dawn broke over the ranch, they buried Sarah Blackwood on the hill overlooking the valley. No words were spoken over the grave. There seemed nothing to say. The children stayed close to their mother, understanding that something fundamental had changed in their world. "What happens now?" Lillian asked as they walked back to the house. Clayton watched Thomas helping his younger siblings over the rough ground, saw Mary comforting little Emma, observed how they moved as a unit, protecting each other. Family. "Now we fix the windows," he said. "Patch the bullet holes. Get ready for winter." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "This is your home now. If you want it, all of you." Lillian stopped walking, searching his face. "Clayton, I made a promise to James," he said. "But that's not why I'm asking you to stay." He struggled with words he'd never thought to say again. "This house has been empty too long. It needs voices, laughter, life. It needs what you've brought to it." "You hardly know us." "I know enough." He met her eyes steadily. "I know you're brave. I know you're loyal. I know you'd die for those children. And I know James Harper was a good judge of character, in friendship and in love." Lillian was quiet for a long moment, watching her children explore their new home with growing confidence. "We'll stay," she said finally, "but not from obligation or gratitude. We'll stay because this feels right, because I think James knew what he was doing when he sent me to find you." As they reached the porch, Emma tugged at Clayton's coat. "Mr. Clayton, are you going to be our new papa?" The question hung in the morning air. Clayton knelt to meet the child's eyes. "Would that be all right with you?" Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. "You keep us safe. That's what papas do." From such simple wisdom, Clayton thought, new lives were built. He stood, offering his arm to Lillian. "Shall we go home?" Together, they entered the house, leaving the shadows of the night behind and stepping into whatever future they would build together, one day at a time. The crack of gunfire split the dawn air as Sarah Blackwood's revolver spun from her grasp. Clayton's shot had been precise, striking the weapon just as she'd drawn on Lillian. The outlaw woman clutched her wounded hand, rage contorting her beautiful features. "You'll pay for that, Reeves," she snarled, backing toward her men. "The only payment due is yours." Marshal Whitley stepped from behind the barn, very much alive, his deputies flanking him with rifles raised. "For bank robbery, murder, and the attempted murder of a federal marshal." Sarah's eyes darted wildly between the armed men closing in. "You're supposed to be dead." "Sorry to disappoint." Whitley's voice was hard as flint. "Deputy Matthews played his part well. Didn't he? We needed you to show yourself, make your move, and you obliged beautifully." Clayton kept his rifle trained on Sarah's men, who looked increasingly uncertain. The trap had been sprung perfectly. Whitley's fake death, Matthews's convincing performance, all designed to draw Sarah into the open. "It was all a setup," Sarah breathed, realization dawning. From the moment Mrs. Harper gave her statement, Whitley confirmed. Her story, combined with your eagerness to help at the marshal's office, told me everything. The scar on your hand was just confirmation. One of Sarah's men made a move for his gun. Deputy Carson's rifle barked, and the man's weapon flew into the dust. Nobody else needs to die tonight. Carson announced, "Drop your guns, now!" The outlaws complied, weapons hitting the ground with dull thuds. Sarah stood defiant even as Whitley approached with shackles. "Where's the bank money, Miss Blackwood?" the marshal asked. Sarah laughed, a bitter sound. "Gone, spent, buried. What does it matter? You've got nothing without it." "We've got your confession, witnessed by several people," Whitley reminded her. "Your vendetta against the Harpers, your father's gang connections, the elaborate frame, it's over." As the deputies secured the outlaws, Sarah's eyes found Lillian standing on the porch. "You took everything from me," she hissed. "James should have been mine." Lillian stepped forward, Clayton moving protectively beside her. "James was never yours to take," she said quietly. "He was a free man who made his choice. Your father raised you to take what you wanted by force. But some things can't be stolen, love. Loyalty, family. Those have to be earned." "Spare me your moralizing." Sarah spat. "You think you've won? You're nothing but a broodmare who trapped him with children and domesticity. I would have given him adventure, passion. You would have given him death." Clayton interrupted coldly. "Just like you gave that bank guard. Just like you tried to give Marshal Whitley. Your kind of love destroys everything it touches." Whitley finished securing Sarah's shackles. "Sarah Blackwood, you're under arrest for robbery, murder, and attempted murder of federal officers. You'll hang for this." As they led her away, Sarah turned one last time. "The money's at Miller's Creek, buried under the hanging tree. Blood money for a blood debt. May it curse whoever finds it." The outlaws were loaded onto horses, hands tied, heads down. Only Sarah rode with her chin high, unrepentant to the last. As the procession disappeared down the trail, an uncomfortable silence settled over the ranch. "Is it really over?" Mary asked from the doorway. Her younger siblings clustered behind her. "Yes, sweetheart," Lillian assured her. "It's over." But Clayton noticed the way her hands still trembled, the shadows that hadn't left her eyes. The immediate danger had passed, but its echoes would linger. Whitley returned an hour later, alone. "Thought you should know we found the money where she said every dollar accounted for. The banks agreed to drop all charges against Mrs. Harper, and there's even a reward for the capture. $500. He handed Clayton a bank draft. "Figured it belongs to you folks, after what you've been through." Clayton tried to refuse, but Whitley insisted. "Consider it the government's apology for the trouble. Besides," he glanced at the children, "looks like you've got some extra mouths to feed now." After the marshal left, Clayton found Lillian in the kitchen, mechanically preparing breakfast. "You should rest," he said gently. "I can't." She kept her back to him. "If I stop moving, I'll start thinking about how close we came, about what could have happened to the children, about—" Her voice broke. Clayton crossed the room in 2 strides, turning her to face him. Tears ran down her cheeks unchecked. "But nothing happened to them," he said firmly. "They're safe. You're safe. That's what matters. I brought danger to your door. You could have been killed because of my past, because of James's past." "Stop." He gripped her shoulders gently. "You brought life to this place. Yes, danger followed, but we faced it, together. That's what families do." She looked up at him through her tears. "Is that what we are, a family?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities. Clayton thought of the empty years before, the lonely silence of the house, the way it had transformed with children's laughter and Lillian's quiet strength. "If you'll have me," he said simply. Before she could answer, Thomas appeared in the doorway, his expression serious beyond his years. "Mr. Clayton, the little ones are asking, that is, we were wondering." He straightened his shoulders. "Are we staying here for good?" Clayton looked at Lillian, saw the answer in her eyes. "This is your home now, Thomas, all of you, for as long as you want it." The boy's careful composure cracked, revealing the child beneath. "Really, we won't have to leave?" "Really," Lillian confirmed, opening her arms as the other children tumbled into the room, drawn by their brother's excitement. Emma attached herself to Clayton's leg. "Does this mean you're our papa now?" Clayton knelt to her level. "Would you like me to be—" She nodded solemnly. "Mama needs someone to help her, and you tell good stories." "When have I told you stories?" "You will," Emma said with 4-year-old certainty. "Papas always tell stories." Despite everything, Clayton found himself smiling. "Then I guess I'd better learn some good ones." Over the following days, the ranch settled into new rhythms. The bullet holes were patched, windows replaced. Thomas proved himself invaluable with the cattle, while Mary took charge of the younger children with natural authority. Even little Emma contributed, gathering eggs with determined concentration. But it was the nights that showed the real changes. No longer did Clayton eat solitary meals or sit alone on the porch. Now dinner was a lively affair, full of chatter about the day's adventures. Evenings brought homework by lamplight, Lillian's patient instruction, and yes, stories before bed, with all 5 children gathered close. "You're good at this," Lillian told him one evening as they sat on the porch, children finally asleep. "At what?" "Being a father, it suits you." Clayton considered this. "Never thought I'd have the chance. Figured that part of life had passed me by." "James knew better," Lillian said softly. "Even in that first letter, he chose you. Not just because you owed him a debt, but because he knew the kind of man you are." "And what kind is that?" She was quiet for a moment, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "The kind who stands between danger and innocence, who keeps his word even when it costs him, who opens his home to strangers and makes them family." "They weren't strangers," Clayton protested. "They were James's family. And now they're yours." She turned to face him fully. "If you want them to be, if you want me to be." The words he'd been struggling to find for days suddenly came easily. "Lillian Harper, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because of obligation or convenience, but because I've come to love you and these children more than I ever thought possible." Her answer was in her eyes before she spoke. "Yes, Clayton, yes." As they sat together in comfortable silence, a rider appeared on the trail. Clayton tensed, hand moving to his rifle, but Lillian touched his arm. "It's just Pete with the mail." The stage driver handed over a small bundle of letters and a package. "Heard you folks had some excitement," he said, eyeing the patched walls. "Also heard congratulations might be in order." News traveled fast on the frontier. Clayton didn't bother denying it. "We'll be needing the circuit preacher next time he's through." Pete grinned. "I'll make sure he knows. About time this place had a proper family in it." He tipped his hat to Lillian. "Ma'am, those young ones of yours need anything from town. You just send word." After he left, Lillian opened the package. Inside was a small silver frame containing a photograph James in his uniform, standing proud and young. A note was attached. "Found this among James's effects at Fort Robinson. Thought his family should have it. Captain Morrison." "We'll hang it in the parlor," Clayton decided. "The children should see their father every day. Remember him." Lillian leaned against his shoulder. "You're not worried they'll make comparisons?" "James was a good man. If I can be half the father he would have been, I'll count myself successful." That night, as Clayton made his rounds checking locks and banking fires, he found himself pausing at each child's door. Thomas, growing into a fine young man. Mary, so responsible beyond her years. Samuel and Ruth, finally learning to play without fear. Little Emma, who'd already claimed his heart completely. In the kitchen, he found Lillian writing in a journal by lamplight. "What are you recording?" "Our story," she said. "So the children will know how their new life began, how a mail-order bride arrangement became something neither of us expected." Clayton read over her shoulder. He waited for one future but received another 5 young souls and one brave woman who needed shelter from the storm. In providing it, he found what he'd truly been seeking all along, not just a wife, but a family. Not just a house, but a home. "You make me sound more noble than I am," he protested. "I write what I see." She closed the journal and stood. A man who chose love over convenience, family over solitude, trust over suspicion. The children see it too. "Why do you think Emma claimed you so quickly?" "Because I'm the only man around," he suggested wryly. "Because children know genuine caring when they feel it." She touched his cheek gently. "As do I." Outside, winter wind rattled the windows, but inside the house was warm and secure. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: ranch work, lessons, the 1,000 small tasks of daily life. There would be trips to town to face down lingering gossip, legal matters to settle regarding the children's adoption, a wedding to plan. But tonight, Clayton Reeves stood in his kitchen with the woman who'd upended his orderly existence and felt nothing but gratitude. He'd sent for a bride and received so much more: a ready-made family. Yes, but also redemption from solitude, purpose beyond mere survival, and love deeper than he'd dared imagine. "No regrets?" Lillian asked, reading his thoughts. "Only one," Clayton admitted. "The James isn't here to see this, to know his family is safe and loved." "He knows," Lillian said with quiet certainty. "Somehow, I believe he knows." As they climbed the stairs together, Clayton thought about the letter that had started it all, not the one from Margaret Sullivan, who'd never existed, but the one from James, written in extremity but with perfect faith. Be that man, Reeves, for them. He had become that man, and in doing so, had discovered the man he was meant to be all along. The wagon wheels creaked in protest as Clayton guided the team down Main Street, Lillian beside him on the bench seat, the children arranged in the bed behind them. It was their first trip to town as a family since the incident with Sarah Blackwood, and Clayton could feel the weight of curious stares from every doorway and window. "Sit tall," he murmured to Lillian, who had unconsciously hunched her shoulders. "We've nothing to be ashamed of." But shame wasn't what haunted her eyes. It was the memory of being accused, of having her character questioned before the entire community. Clayton understood. In frontier towns, reputation was currency, and theirs had been badly tarnished by Sarah's schemes. Outside Morrison's general store, Mrs. Adelaide Morrison stood with her circle of churchwomen, their heads bent together in animated discussion. As the wagon approached, their conversation ceased abruptly, replaced by cold assessment. "Mr. Reeves," Adelaide acknowledged with minimal courtesy, her eyes sliding past Lillian as if she weren't there. Clayton touched his hat brim. "Mrs. Morrison, ladies." He helped Lillian down from the wagon, keeping his hand at her elbow in clear support. "Fine weather we're having." "Indeed." Adelaide's tone could have frozen water. "Though I hear you've had some weather of a different sort at your ranch." Before Clayton could respond, her companion, Mrs. Prudence Hartley, stepped forward. "Really, Mr. Reeves, taking in a woman of questionable background, exposing yourself to such scandal. What would your dear mother have thought?" Clayton's jaw tightened. His mother had been dead 15 years, but the town matrons invoked her memory whenever they wanted to shame him. "My mother," he said evenly, "taught me to help those in need and not to judge by appearances. I believe I'm honoring her memory perfectly." "By harboring a suspected criminal," Prudence's voice rose, "with 5 children who might not even be—" "Careful." Clayton's voice dropped dangerously low. "You're speaking of my intended bride and our children. Choose your next words wisely." The women exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for such direct confrontation. Men usually left social matters to their womenfolk, but Clayton had never been one for convention. Thomas jumped down from the wagon, moving to stand beside his mother. At 12, he was already showing signs of his father's protective nature. "Ma'am." He addressed Mrs. Hartley with careful politeness. "My mother's never done anything wrong. That woman who robbed the bank just used her name. Marshall Whitley said so." "Hush, child." Adelaide waved dismissively. "This is adult business." "No." Lillian spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite the color in her cheeks. "My son has every right to defend his family's honor. More right than those who'd condemn us based on gossip and spite." The tension crackled between them until Reverend Michael Dowd emerged from the church across the street, a younger man who'd recently taken over the parish. He approached with purposeful strides. "Ladies, Mr. Reeves, Mrs. Harper." He nodded to each. "What a blessing to see the entire family in town. I trust you'll be attending services on Sunday." "Reverend," Adelaide protested. "Surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm suggesting," he interrupted gently but firmly, "that we remember Matthew 7:1. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Mrs. Harper has been cleared of all charges. To continue treating her as a pariah speaks more to our failings than hers." Clayton felt Lillian's hand slip into his, a silent gesture of gratitude, but their ordeal wasn't over. As they entered the general store, conversation stopped mid-sentence. Frank Morrison, Adelaide's husband, stood behind the counter, his expression carefully neutral. "What can I do for you folks?" Clayton handed over their list. "Monthly supplies, and the children need new shoes for winter." Frank's eyes flicked to Lillian, then away. "Shoes are in the back. The missus usually helps with fitting the young ones, but she's occupied." "I can manage," Lillian said quietly, gathering the younger children. As they moved through the store, Clayton heard the whispers starting up again. Can't believe he'd take her in. Probably after his money. Those poor children, what kind of example? His hands clenched, but it was Samuel who spoke up, his 8-year-old voice carrying clearly, "Mama, why are those ladies saying mean things?" "Because sometimes people are afraid of what they don't understand," Lillian answered, loud enough to be overheard. "But we know the truth, and that's what matters." At the shoe display, Emma spotted a pair of red boots and clasped her hands together. "Oh, Mama, look." "They're lovely, sweetheart, but—" "We'll take them," Clayton said firmly, "and whatever else the children need." Lillian turned to him. "Clayton, that's too much." "My family deserves decent shoes," he said, meeting her eyes. "All of them, no arguments." The tenderness that crossed her face was worth every penny. They were loading their purchases when Walter McKenna stumbled out of the saloon across the street. The town drunk, but from an old family. He weaved toward them with malicious purpose. "Well, well," he slurred. "If it ain't the widow Harper and her protector. Tell me, Reeves, she pay you back for your kindness in the usual way? Or are you waiting for the wedding to sample the goods?" Clayton moved so fast McKenna didn't have time to react. One moment he was leering at Lillian. The next, he was pressed against the saloon wall with Clayton's forearm across his throat. "You're drunk, McKenna, so I'll give you one chance to apologize to the lady. One." "Clayton, please." Lillian's voice came from behind him. "He's not worth it. The children are watching." That reached him. Clayton released McKenna, who slumped against the wall, gasping. But as Clayton turned away, the drunk made one last mistake. "Just like her brats are watching when you—" Clayton's fist connected with McKenna's jaw, dropping him into the dust. The street erupted in shocked murmurs. But Clayton only had eyes for Lillian. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I won't stand by while anyone insults you or the children." "I know." She touched his bruised knuckles gently. "But violence won't change their minds." "Maybe not, but it might make them think twice before voicing their poison." Sheriff Ben Taylor appeared, badge glinting in the afternoon sun. An older man who'd kept the peace through range wars and gold rushes. He surveyed the scene with weary experience. McKenna running his mouth again. Among other things, Clayton confirmed. Taylor nodded. "Witnesses say he had it coming. Still, might be best if you folks finished your business and headed home. Let tempers cool." As they prepared to leave, something unexpected happened. Tom Chen, who ran the laundry, approached with a small package, an immigrant who'd faced his own share of prejudice. He pressed it into Lillian's hands. "For the children," he said in accented English. "Peppermint sticks. They are good children. You are good mother." Then Mrs. Elena Rodriguez, whose husband worked at Clayton's ranch during Roundup, stepped forward. "My Maria outgrew these dresses. Perhaps your Ruth could use them." One by one, others approached. Not many, but enough. The barber's wife with a jar of preserves. The blacksmith offering to check their horses' shoes for free. Small gestures. But in a town where reputation was everything, they were declarations of support. Adelaide Morrison watched from her store doorway, face pinched with displeasure. "You'll regret this," she called out. "Taking in strangers, disturbing our peace. Mark my words. Clayton Reeves, no good will come of it." Clayton helped Emma onto the wagon, then turned to face the woman who'd appointed herself the town's moral guardian. "Mrs. Morrison, I've spent 10 years alone on that ranch, doing what was expected, living by your rules of propriety, and what did it gain me? Empty rooms and silence." He lifted Ruth and Samuel up next. "These children have brought more joy to my home in 2 weeks than I've known in a decade. Their mother has shown more courage facing your scorn than most show in a lifetime. So yes, I'll take my chances with them over your approval any day." As their wagon rolled out of town, Lillian sat quietly beside him, the children unusually subdued in the back. Finally, Mary spoke up. "Those people don't like us much, do they?" "Some don't," Clayton acknowledged. "But did you notice the ones who do Mr. Chen, Mrs. Rodriguez? Reverend Dowd, good people recognize other good people, even if it takes time." "Will it always be like this?" Thomas asked. Clayton considered lying, offering false comfort. But these children had faced enough harsh realities to deserve truth. For a while, yes. But every day we live honorably, work hard, treat our neighbors well, we chip away at their prejudice. Eventually, they'll see you for who you are, not who they feared you might be. "And if they don't?" Samuel wondered. "Then we'll have lived good lives anyway," Lillian said firmly. "And that's worth more than their approval." As the ranch came into view, Emma piped up, "I still got my red boots." The tension broke as everyone laughed. "Yes, you did," Lillian smiled. "What do you say to Mr. Clayton?" "Thank you, Papa Clayton." The title, used so naturally, stopped Clayton's breath. He glanced at Lillian, who was watching him with soft eyes. "You're welcome, little one," he managed. That evening, as Lillian helped the girls prepare for bed, Clayton found Thomas in the barn, carefully oiling a saddle. "You did well today," Clayton said, "standing up for your mother. Pa used to say a man protects his family." Thomas didn't look up from his work. "I'm trying to be the man he wanted me to be." "You're doing fine." Clayton sat on a hay bale. "But you're still a boy. Don't carry burdens meant for grown men." "Someone has to, with Pa gone?" "I'm here now." Clayton said it simply, but with weight. "Your mother has me. You all do. That's not going to change." Thomas finally looked up, and Clayton saw the struggle in his young face, wanting to trust but afraid to hope. You promise?" "I promise." They worked together in comfortable silence, the simple ritual of maintaining equipment bridging the gap between them. When they returned to the house, they found the family gathered in the parlor, Lillian reading aloud from Pilgrim's Progress while the children listened raptly. She looked up as they entered, making room on the sofa. Clayton settled beside her, Emma immediately climbing into his lap, while Thomas joined his siblings on the floor. As Lillian's voice resumed the story, Clayton looked around the room at the mended curtains and scattered toys, the children's drawings tacked to the wall, James's photograph watching benevolently from the mantel. This was what he had been protecting today. Not just individuals, but a family, his family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more trips to town, more confrontations with those who couldn't see past their prejudices. The ranch work never stopped, and 5 children meant constant demands on time and resources. But tonight, surrounded by the quiet breathing of children and the soft cadence of Lillian's voice, Clayton Reeves knew he was exactly where he belonged. He'd waited at that fence for a mail-order bride, expecting to fill the empty spaces in his life. Instead, he'd received something far more precious, a love already tested by loss, children who needed a father's strength, and the chance to become the man he'd always had the potential to be. Adelaide Morrison was wrong. Good had already come of it, and the best was yet to be. The drought had lasted 43 days. Clayton stood at the edge of what used to be Miller's Creek, now reduced to a muddy trickle between cracked banks. The cattle, once fat on summer grass, stood listlessly in whatever shade they could find, ribs beginning to show through their dusty hides. "How bad is it?" Lillian asked, joining him with a canteen of warm water. Clayton accepted it gratefully, though he only allowed himself a small sip. "Bad enough. If we don't get rain soon, we'll have to sell off half the herd at a loss. Maybe more." She was quiet, understanding what that meant. The ranch operated on thin margins even in good years. A drought like this could ruin them. "The children don't know," she said softly. "I've been careful with the water, but they haven't asked why. They're smart kids. They know." Clayton had seen Thomas watching the sky each morning, had caught Mary rationing her own water to leave more for the younger ones. "We'll need to dig a new well. The old one's dropping fast." "Can we afford?" "We can't afford not to." He turned from the dying creek. "I'll take Thomas to town tomorrow, see about hiring help. Jorge Rodriguez and his boys are good with wells." That evening, the house felt heavier with unspoken worry. The children picked at their simple meal of beans and cornbread, the meat having run out days ago. Clayton had been hunting, but game was scarce, driven to higher ground by the drought. "Papa Clayton," Ruth ventured, "why are the cows so sad?" "They're thirsty, sweetheart," he answered honestly. "Just like the grass and trees, everything's waiting for rain." "Then we should pray for rain," Emma declared with 4-year-old certainty. "Reverend Dowd says God listens when we pray." Clayton exchanged glances with Lillian. His own faith had been tested by years of solitary struggle, but these children still believed in providence. "That's a fine idea, Emma." After dinner, they worked together in the fading light. Thomas and Clayton reinforced the chicken coop roof where the sun had warped the boards. Mary and Lillian mended clothes by lamplight, making each garment last. The younger children gathered buffalo chips for fuel, the wood being too precious to burn freely. "I remember when Papa was alive," Samuel said suddenly, his arms full of dried grass. "We had a drought in Iowa, too. He said tough times show what families are made of." "Your papa was a wise man," Clayton affirmed, helping the boy stack the fuel. "What else did he say?" "That we're stronger together than apart. Like a rope, single threads break easy, but wound together they can hold anything." Clayton's throat tightened, even gone. James Harper was still teaching his children and perhaps teaching Clayton too. The next morning brought no relief, just another blazing sun in a cloudless sky. Clayton and Thomas set out early for town, leaving Lillian to manage the ranch. The wagon wheels kicked up dust that hung in the still air like smoke. "Mr. Clayton," Thomas said after a mile of silence, "are we going to lose the ranch?" Clayton considered lying, but the boy deserved truth. "We might, but not without a fight. Your mother and I have faced worse and survived." "What could be worse than losing everything?" "Losing each other," Clayton answered simply. "Long as we're together, we can rebuild. It's just land and cattle. Family, that's what can't be replaced." In town, they found Jorge Rodriguez at the smithy, getting his horses shod. The Mexican man listened gravely to Clayton's proposal, his weathered face thoughtful. "A new well. In this drought, it's possible, but we'd have to go deep, very deep, and even then," he shrugged eloquently. "Your price?" Jorge named a figure that made Clayton's stomach clench. It was fair, more than fair for the risk involved, but it would take nearly all their remaining savings. "When can you start?" "You're sure, senor, if we don't find water?" "Then we'll deal with that when it comes." Clayton shook the man's hand. "Tomorrow." "Don, we'll bring everything." As they loaded supplies, trying to stretch each dollar, Clayton noticed a crowd gathered outside the land office. Walter McKenna, sporting a still-healing jaw from their last encounter, was holding court. "Buying up all the failed ranches cheap," he was saying. "Man from back east, name of Prescott, says the railroad's coming through next year, wants the water rights, offering cash money for anybody willing to sell now." Thomas looked up at Clayton with alarm. "We're not selling—" "Are we?" "Not to any vulture looking to profit from misfortune," Clayton assured him. But his mind was working. If this Prescott was buying water rights, he'd eventually come for Miller's Creek. What was left of it ran through Clayton's land. That evening, Clayton found Lillian sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the dusty sky crimson. The children were inside, doing lessons by lamplight. "Jorge Rodriguez will start on the well tomorrow," he told her, settling beside her on the bench. "And if they don't find water, then we'll dig another, and another after that if need be." She leaned against his shoulder. "You're a stubborn man, Clayton Reeves." "Learned it from a stubborn woman who traveled 2,000 miles with 5 children rather than give up." They sat quietly, listening to the evening sounds, what few remained. Even the crickets seemed subdued by the heat. "I've been thinking," Lillian said eventually, "about what we could sell if we need to. I have my mother's brooch." "No." "Clayton." "No." He took her hand. "We don't sell family treasures, not unless we're down to our last bean, and maybe not even then. Pride won't feed the children. Neither will regret." He squeezed her fingers gently. "That brooch is for Mary when she marries. Or Emma, something from their grandmother they never met. We'll find another way." The next week was a blur of back-breaking work. Jorge and his sons arrived each dawn, digging relentlessly despite the heat. Clayton and Thomas hauled away the excavated dirt and rocks, while the other children helped where they could. Even little Emma carried water to the workers, her red boots gray with dust. 30 feet down, they hit bedrock. Jorge climbed out, shaking his head. "We'll have to blast. It'll cost more, and there's no guarantee." "Do it," Clayton said. The blasting took 3 days and what felt like a fortune in dynamite. Adelaide Morrison made sure to mention at every opportunity how foolish Clayton was, throwing good money after bad. But others watched with quiet hope if Reeves found water. Maybe there was hope for them all. 50 feet, 60. The walls of the well had to be shored with precious timber to prevent cave-ins. Samuel and Ruth organized the younger children in town to collect stones for lining the well, turning it into a game. Soon, other ranch children were helping, their parents' prejudices temporarily forgotten in shared adversity. One evening, exhausted and covered in dirt, Clayton found the entire family in the kitchen, busy with some secret project. "What's this?" "We're making preserves," Mary announced proudly. "From the prickly pears and wild plums. Mama says we can sell them in town." The counter was covered with jars, each carefully filled and labeled. Lillian's hands were stained purple from the fruit, and there was flour in her hair, but she smiled at his surprise. "Everyone's helping," Thomas added. "Even Emma's been picking fruit." "I got poked," Emma showed him her bandaged finger proudly. "But I didn't cry. Much." Clayton's chest tightened with emotion. While he'd been focused on the well, his family had found their own way to fight. "How many jars?" 43 so far, Lillian reported. "Mrs. Rodriguez thinks she can sell them at the Mexican market, and Reverend Dowd wants some for the church social." It wouldn't save the ranch, but it would help. More importantly, it gave them purpose, hope. That night, despite exhaustion, Clayton helped label jars until his fingers cramped. 70 feet down, Jorge's youngest son, Miguel, gave a shout that brought everyone running. "Agua, agua!" Water. Not much, just a seep at first, but water nonetheless. Jorge climbed down to inspect, emerging with a grin that split his dust-caked face. "It's good sweet water, and it's rising, slow but steady." The cheer that went up could probably be heard in town. Thomas threw his hat in the air. Mary hugged everyone within reach, and the younger children danced around the well site. Clayton found himself with an armful of Lillian, her tears of relief soaking his shirt. "We did it," she whispered. "We really did it." "Together," he corrected, holding her tight. "Just like Samuel's rope." Word spread quickly. By afternoon, neighboring ranchers were arriving to see for themselves. Some came to congratulate, others to gauge whether they should dig their own wells. But all came with a new respect for the Eastern widow and the solitary rancher who'd refused to quit. Even Adelaide Morrison's husband, Frank, showed up with a grudging nod. "Glad you found water. Reeves. Be good for the whole valley if this drought breaks." That evening, as they gathered for dinner still simple but seasoned with hope, Clayton raised his glass of precious well water. "To the Harper Reeves family. May we always dig deep when times get hard. To Papa Clayton." Thomas countered. "Who taught us how?" They drank, the water tasting sweeter than any wine. Outside, clouds were building on the horizon, perhaps just another false hope, but clouds nonetheless. That night, as Clayton made his rounds, he found Lillian in the barn, checking on a sick calf they'd been nursing. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too grateful to sleep." She stroked the calf's head gently. 2 months ago, I was ready to give up. Now look at us, a well, a barn full of preserves, children who've learned they can survive anything, and a wedding to plan. Clayton reminded her. "Reverend Dowd asked me again today when we're setting a date." Lillian smiled. "After the drought breaks, I want green grass and wildflowers, not dust and tumbleweeds." "Could be waiting a while." "Then we wait." She stood, moving into his arms. "We've got water now. We can afford to wait for perfect." Thunder rumbled in the distance, still far off, but full of promise. Clayton pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair dust and fruit preserves and hope. "You know what James told me once," he said quietly. "During a drought at Fort Robinson, he said the land tests us not to break us, but to show us what we're made of." "What are we made of?" Clayton Reeves. He thought of Thomas growing into a fine young man, of Mary's quiet strength, of Samuel and Ruth's resilience, of Emma's unshakable spirit. He thought of Lillian's courage and his own newfound purpose. "Iron and clay," he said finally. "Stubborn as the land itself, and love enough to make it all worthwhile." The first drops of rain began to fall as they walked back to the house, hand in hand, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. The rumors started with whispers at the general store, spreading like wildfire through the drought-stricken valley. Sarah Blackwood had escaped custody during a prisoner transport to Denver. 2 guards dead, 3 wounded. And according to the telegraph from Marshal Whitley's replacement, she'd been heard swearing vengeance on those who'd wronged her. Clayton received the news from Sheriff Taylor himself, who rode out to the ranch on a gray morning that matched everyone's mood. "Thought you should hear it from me," Taylor said, accepting a cup of coffee in the kitchen. "She killed those guards with their own weapons. Woman's more dangerous than we knew." Lillian's hands stilled on the bread she was kneading. "You think she'll come here?" "Can't say for certain, ma'am, but you testified against her. That might be enough reason for someone like her." The sheriff turned to Clayton. "I'd post extra watches. Keep the children close." After Taylor left, Clayton found Lillian staring out the window, her shoulders rigid with tension. "I thought it was over," she said quietly. "I thought we were safe." "We are safe," Clayton said firmly. "She'd be a fool to come here. Every lawman in 3 territories is looking for her." But even as he spoke, he was calculating checking ammunition, considering defensive positions, wondering if he should send the family away until Sarah was recaptured. That evening, Thomas approached him in the barn. "I heard what the sheriff said about that woman." Clayton continued checking his rifle, weighing how much to tell the boy. "You heard right, but that doesn't mean she's coming here." "But if she does, then we'll be ready." Clayton met the boy's eyes. "You remember what I taught you about the shotgun?" Thomas nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir, but I hope I don't have to use it." "So do I, son. So do I." The next days passed intense vigilance. Clayton rode the property boundaries each dawn and dusk, looking for signs of strangers. Lillian kept the children close, continuing their lessons and chores, but always within sight of the house. Even the younger ones sensed the change, growing quiet and clingy. It was Marcus Whitley who arrived first, a week after the escape. No longer a marshal, but riding as a special investigator. He looked older, wearier than when they'd last met. "Mrs. Harper." He greeted Lillian with genuine warmth. "Reeves, I'm sorry to bring trouble back to your door." "It's not your fault she escaped," Lillian said, offering him a seat on the porch. "Might be it is," Whitley admitted. "I underestimated her. Thought she was just another spurned woman turned bad. But there's something broken in Sarah Blackwood, something that can't be fixed." "Any leads?" Clayton asked. "Trail went cold outside Trinidad, but there's something else." Whitley pulled out a worn notebook. "Been investigating her past, that story about her father being hanged. Only half true. Samuel Blackwood was hanged, but not before teaching his daughter everything he knew. She rode with his gang from age 15. The infatuation with your husband." He nodded to Lillian. That might have been the only real emotion she ever felt. "And when he rejected her," Lillian trailed off. "It broke whatever humanity was left." Whitley stood. "I'll be staying in town, coordinating the search. But Reeves, if she comes here—" "We'll be ready," Clayton assured him. That night, unable to sleep, Clayton found Lillian in the kitchen making bread, her way of managing worry. "You're frightened," he observed. "Terrified," she corrected, not looking up from her kneading. "Not for myself. For them. For you." He moved behind her, stilling her flour-dusted hands. "Nothing's going to happen to this family, not while I draw breath." She turned in his arms, searching his face. "You can't promise that. No one can." "Then I promise this, whatever comes. We face it together, all of us." A sound from upstairs made them both freeze footsteps, too heavy to be one of the children. Clayton grabbed his rifle, pushing Lillian behind him as he moved toward the stairs. "Papa Clayton," Mary's voice, frightened. "There's someone outside my window." Clayton took the stairs 3 at a time, in the girls' room. Mary and Ruth huddled together on one bed while Emma clutched her doll. Through the window, a shadow moved against the barn wall. "Stay here," he ordered. But Lillian was already shepherding the girls into the hallway. Thomas emerged from his room with a shotgun. Samuel behind him. "Thomas, guard the stairs. Anyone tries to come up who isn't me, you shoot. Understand?" The boy's face was pale but determined. "Yes, sir." Clayton slipped out the back door, moving silently despite the darkness. The shadow by the barn resolved into a figure trying to force the door too large to be Sarah, but clearly up to no good. "Hold it right there," Clayton commanded, rifle aimed. The figure spun, hand going for a gun. Clayton fired, the shot shattering the night quiet. The intruder dropped, cursing. Clayton approached cautiously, then relaxed marginally. Not Sarah, one of the men who'd ridden with her during the attack on the ranch. "Where is she?" Clayton demanded. "Kicking the man's gun away?" "Go to hell, Reeves." The man clutched his wounded shoulder. "She'll make you pay for what you done." Lights were appearing in the house, voices calling. "I'm all right," Clayton shouted. "Thomas, stay put." By the time Sheriff Taylor arrived with deputies, they'd found 2 more of Sarah's gang watching the road into the ranch. Neither would say where Sarah was, but their presence suggested she was close. "She's testing your defenses," Taylor concluded, "seeing how ready you are." "Then she has her answer," Clayton said grimly. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Jorge Rodriguez arrived with his sons and several other Mexican families from the valley. "We hear you have trouble. Señor, we come to help." "This isn't your fight, Jorge. You dug a well in drought time, shared water with everyone. You treated us fair when others wouldn't. This makes it our fight too." By noon, the ranch looked like a small fort. Men patrolled in shifts. Women organized supplies and meals. The children, resilient as always, adapted to their restricted freedom by creating games within the safe areas. On the 3rd night of the siege, Lillian found Clayton standing watch on the porch. "You haven't slept in 2 days." "I'll sleep when she's caught." "And if that takes weeks, months." She pressed a cup of coffee into his hands. "You're no good to us exhausted." Before he could argue, a shout went up from the patrol. Riders approaching under a white flag. Clayton squinted through the darkness, tension coiling in his gut. It was Sarah Blackwood herself, accompanied by a single man. She stopped just within rifle range, sitting her horse with casual arrogance. "Clayton Reeves," she called. "I come to parley." Every gun on the ranch swung toward her, but she seemed unconcerned. In the lamplight from the house, her beauty was still evident, but marked now by something wild and dangerous. "State your business and leave," Clayton responded. "My business is with Lillian Harper, the woman who stole my life." "I stole nothing from you," Lillian said, stepping onto the porch despite Clayton's attempt to stop her. "James chose his own path." Sarah's composure cracked slightly. "He would have chosen me if not for you." "I was patient. I was everything he could have wanted." "You were a killer's daughter playing at being respectable," Lillian interrupted. James saw through it. That's why he chose differently. The silence stretched taut before Sarah spoke again, her voice now deadly calm. "I'll make you a deal, Lillian. Face me, just you and me. No men, no guns. If you win, I leave and never return. If I win—" She smiled coldly. "Well, you won't have to worry about anything anymore." "No," Clayton said flatly. "I accept," Lillian said at the same moment. Chaos erupted, Clayton arguing, the patrol members shouting warnings, Sarah laughing. But Lillian stood firm. "Dawn," she called to Sarah. "In the canyon between here and town, just us." "Lillian, no." Clayton gripped her shoulders. "This is insane. She's a killer." "And I'm a mother protecting her children." Lillian said quietly, "She won't stop. Clayton, not until one of us is dead, at least this way. It's on my terms." Sarah had already turned her horse. "Dawn," she confirmed, then disappeared into the darkness. The house erupted in arguments, plans, fears, but Lillian weathered it all with calm determination. When they were finally alone, Clayton made one last attempt. "I can't lose you. Not now. Not like this." She touched his face gently. "You won't. James taught me more than just shooting. He taught me that sometimes we have to stand up to evil directly. Sarah thinks I'm just a weak Eastern woman who got lucky once. Let her keep thinking that. And if you're wrong, then you'll raise our children to be strong and good. But I'm not wrong." She kissed him softly. "Trust me." Dawn came too quickly. The canyon was neutral ground, witnessed by men from town and ranch alike. Sheriff Taylor tried once more to arrest Sarah, but she claimed the right of personal combat to settle grievances, an old law still technically valid in the territory. The two women faced each other across 20 paces. Sarah, dressed in black, looked every inch the seasoned gunfighter. Lillian wore her simple gray dress, James's pistol at her hip. "Any last words?" Sarah asked mockingly. "Yes," Lillian said clearly. "You never understood James at all. He didn't reject you because of me. He rejected you because he saw your father in your eyes. The same cruelty, the same emptiness. I pity you. Sarah, you've never known real love." Sarah's face contorted with rage. "Draw!" The canyon exploded with gunfire. 2 shots, so close they sounded as one. For a heartbeat, both women stood frozen. Then Sarah Blackwood crumpled, a red stain spreading across her chest. Her gun fell from nerveless fingers, unfired. "How?" she gasped as Lillian approached. "Because I wasn't shooting out of hate," Lillian said quietly. "I was protecting what I love. That's something you never understood." Sarah's eyes found Clayton in the crowd. "Take care of her," she whispered, then was still. Lillian swayed, and Clayton was there to catch her. Not wounded, just overwhelmed by what she'd had to do. Around them, men removed their hats, acknowledging what they'd witnessed, not murder, but justice. "It's over," Clayton murmured into her hair. "It's finally over." Sheriff Taylor confirmed what many had seen Sarah had drawn first, or tried to. Lillian's shot had been faster, cleaner, the result of love rather than hate. Back at the ranch, the children waited anxiously. When they saw their mother return safely, the relief was palpable. Emma ran into Lillian's arms, followed quickly by the others. "Mama, were you scared?" Ruth asked. "Very scared," Lillian admitted. "But sometimes we do things despite our fear because they're necessary." That night, as life slowly returned to normal, Clayton found Lillian standing by James's photograph in the parlor. "Do you think he'd approve?" she asked softly. "Of what I did?" "I think," Clayton said carefully, "he'd be proud of the woman you've become. The woman you always were, just waiting for the chance to show it." She leaned into his embrace. "No more shadows from the past." "No more shadows," he confirmed. "Only the future we build together." Outside, thunder rumbled again, closer this time, full of promise. The drought would break soon, washing the land clean, and the Harper Reeves family would be ready for whatever came next, stronger for having weathered this storm together. The courthouse in town had never seen such a crowd. Every bench was filled, with more people standing along the walls and spilling out onto the street. The matter at hand was unprecedented in the territory, a formal adoption hearing for 5 children, with all the legal complexities that entailed. Judge Theodore Blackstone, a circuit judge known for his fairness and thorough knowledge of territorial law, presided with solemn dignity. His white beard and penetrating eyes gave him an almost biblical appearance as he reviewed the documents before him. "Mr. Clayton Reeves," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed room, "you have petitioned this court to formally adopt the 5 minor children of the late James Harper. Is this correct?" Clayton stood, hat in hand, Lillian beside him. "Yes, Your Honor." And you, Mrs. Lillian Harper, consent to this adoption? I do, Your Honor, but there's more. Lillian's voice was steady despite the weight of every eye upon her. Mr. Reeves and I intend to marry. We wanted the adoption settled first, so there'd be no question about the children's security. A murmur ran through the crowd. Adelaide Morrison sniffed audibly from her front row seat, but many others nodded approval. The judge leaned forward. I see. And the children themselves, what are their wishes? One by one, the Harper children stood. Thomas, almost 13 now and tall for his age, spoke first. Your Honor, Clayton Reeves has been more of a father to us these past months than we had any right to expect. We'd be proud to carry his name. Mary, Ruth, and Samuel each affirmed their brother's words in their own way. Then little Emma, clutching her doll, piped up, Papa Clayton tells the best stories and keeps the monsters away. Can we keep him? Gentle laughter rippled through the room. Even Judge Blackstone's stern features softened slightly. Well, Miss Emma, that's what we're here to decide. He shuffled through more papers. I see letters here from Marshal Whitley, Sheriff Taylor, Reverend Dowd, and... He raised an eyebrow. 17 other citizens attesting to Mr. Reeves's character and the welfare of these children under his care. Clayton was stunned. He'd known Lillian had gathered some supporting documents, but 17 letters. He glanced around the room, recognizing faces of neighbors who'd initially shunned them, the Rodriguezes, of course, but also Frank Morrison, despite his wife's disapproval, Doc Winters, even Walter McKenna, sober and shamefaced. However, the judge continued, and the room tensed. There are serious matters to consider. Mr. Reeves, you are a bachelor. These children have been through significant trauma, the loss of their father, accusations against their mother, violence at your ranch. How do we know placing them permanently in your care serves their best interests? Before Clayton could respond, Lillian stood. Your Honor, may I address that? The judge nodded. 6 months ago, I arrived at Clayton's ranch under false pretenses, desperate and afraid. I had 5 hungry children and no hope left. By every right, he should have turned us away. Instead, he opened his home. When danger followed us, he stood between my children and harm. When drought threatened, he spent everything to dig a well rather than see us go thirsty. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. But more than that, he's taught Thomas about honor and hard work. He's shown Mary that her quiet strength has value. He's given Samuel and Ruth security they'd never known, and he's loved Emma as if she were his own blood. Your Honor, Clayton Reeves isn't taking on a burden by adopting these children. He's formalizing what's already true in every way that matters. He's their father. The silence that followed was profound. Then, from the back of the room, Jorge Rodriguez stood. Your Honor, if I may, proceed. I have worked for many ranchers in this valley. Some treat us fair, some don't. But Senor Reeves, he treats all men with respect. When my youngest son was sick, he rode through the night to fetch the doctor. When the drought came, he shared his water with everyone. Not just paying customers. This is a man who understands family goes beyond blood. Others stood to speak. Elena Rodriguez talked about how the Reeves Ranch had become a gathering place for all the valley's children, a safe haven where differences were forgotten. Doc Winters testified to the children's improved health and spirits. Even Reverend Dowd, usually reserved, spoke passionately about the transformation he'd witnessed. Your Honor, he concluded, I've seen what becomes of orphaned children with no one to claim them. These children have someone willing to claim them, love them, provide for them. How is this even a question? Judge Blackstone raised a hand for silence. Mr. Reeves, do you understand that adoption is permanent? These children would have full inheritance rights, full claim to your name and legacy. In the eyes of the law, they would be yours as completely as if you'd fathered them yourself. Clayton's voice was firm. I understand, Your Honor, And that's exactly what I want. And you're prepared for the financial burden 5 children require significant resources. We've weathered a drought, Your Honor, built a new well. The ranch is prospering now. But even if it weren't, even if we lost everything tomorrow, we'd still be family. That won't change. The judge turned to the children again. You've heard Mr. Reeves's words. Children, do you understand what adoption means? You would no longer be Harper children, but Reeves children. Thomas stepped forward again, his young face serious. Your Honor, our father, our blood father, wrote a letter before he died. He asked Clayton Reeves to be that man for us, the man who protects, provides, and loves without condition. Mr. Reeves has been that man. We want to honor both our fathers by taking the name of the one who lived to raise us. But we'll keep Papa James in our hearts, Emma added solemnly. Papa Clayton said so. Judge Blackstone removed his spectacles, cleaning them slowly, a delay that had everyone holding their breath. Finally, he looked up. In my 20 years on the bench, I've seen many adoption cases. Often, they're matters of convenience or obligation. Rarely have I seen one so clearly rooted in love and mutual choice. He stood, adding gravity to his words. It is the judgment of this court that the adoption petition be granted in full. From this day forward, these 5 children shall be known as Thomas Reeves, Mary Reeves, Samuel Reeves, Ruth Reeves, and Emma Reeves, with all rights and privileges therein. The courthouse erupted. The children swarmed Clayton and Lillian, laughing and crying simultaneously. Well-wishers pressed forward to offer congratulations. Even Adelaide Morrison managed a tight nod of acknowledgement before sweeping out with her dignity intact. Outside the courthouse, in the bright morning sun, the new Reeves family stood together as photographers from the territorial newspaper captured the moment. Clayton held Emma on one arm, his other around Lillian, while the older children arranged themselves proudly around them. Well, Reeves children, Clayton said with a grin. What shall we do to celebrate? Ice cream, Emma shouted, and her siblings quickly agreed. As they walked toward the general store, Thomas fell into step beside Clayton. Sir, Pa, thank you. I know this wasn't what you expected when you placed that advertisement. No, Clayton agreed, ruffling the boy's hair. It was better. Later that afternoon, back at the ranch, they held a second celebration. The Mexican families brought food and music. Neighbors who'd been at the courthouse came to extend their good wishes. The house that had stood empty for so long overflowed with life and laughter. Clayton found a quiet moment to visit the small cemetery plot on the hill where they'd buried Sarah Blackwood. A simple marker bore only her name and dates. He'd insisted on that much dignity. Despite everything, it didn't have to end this way, he said quietly to the stone. But I'll keep my promise. I'll take care of them. Returning to the celebration, he found Lillian organizing an impromptu dance in the barn. Jorge's nephew played fiddle while couples swirled across the hay-strewn floor. The children were everywhere, Emma dancing on Frank Morrison's feet, Thomas attempting to teach Mary a reel, Samuel and Ruth spinning until they collapsed in giggles. Mrs. Harper, Clayton said formally, extending his hand. May I have this dance? Why, Mr. Reeves, she replied with mock propriety. I'd be delighted, though you should know, in 3 weeks' time, I won't be Mrs. Harper anymore. No, he agreed, pulling her into the dance. You'll be Mrs. Reeves, mother to the 5 finest children in the territory. 6, she corrected softly. Clayton missed a step. 6? She smiled up at him, radiant with her secret. Come spring. I saw Doc Winters yesterday to be sure. Clayton stopped dancing entirely, searching her face. You're certain? Very certain. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed. The other dancers stopped to watch, and when he set her down and kissed her soundly, the barn erupted in cheers. What's happening? Emma demanded, tugging at Clayton's coat. "You're going to be a big sister," Lillian told her, smoothing the child's hair. Emma's eyes went wide. "Really a baby?" "Really?" The little girl considered this momentous news, then beamed. "Can I name it?" "We'll see," Clayton said diplomatically, already imagining the interesting suggestions Emma might provide. As the celebration continued around them, Clayton and Lillian slipped outside to watch the sunset painting the valley gold. The ranch spread before them, the sturdy house with its new additions, the barn full of healthy cattle, the well that had saved them all, the fields already showing green from recent rains. "No regrets?" Lillian asked, echoing his question from months ago. "None," Clayton said firmly. "Except—" She looked up, concerned. "Except I should have dug that well years ago. Would have saved myself a lot of lonely suppers." She laughed, leaning into his embrace. "Everything in its time, Mr. Reeves, everything in its time." From the barn came the sound of music and laughter, of children calling for their parents to come see something wonderful. The sun settled behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, blessing the land and the family who'd found each other against all odds. Clayton Reeves had sent for a mail-order bride and received so much more a widow with the courage to cross a continent, 5 children who needed a father, and the chance to build something that would last long after they were all gone. The empty spaces in his life hadn't just been filled. They'd been transformed into something he'd never dared imagine. As they walked hand in hand back to their family, their home, their future, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, bright points of light guiding them forward. Just as James Harper's faith had guided them together, the Reeves Ranch stood ready for whatever tomorrow might bring, filled with love, laughter, and the promise of new life. And in the end, that was the greatest treasure of all. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this journey through the American frontier. If you've enjoyed this tale of love, courage, and family, please share where you're listening from, whether it's during your commute, at home, or somewhere across the globe. Subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more authentic stories of the Old West. And don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, partners.